Here to cure your sunny disposition, it's Bad Things in History. Today we're going to look at cannibalism throughout history. Cannibalism is typically defined as the act of eating another individual of the same species. It's so common in the animal kingdom that it has been observed in at least 1,500 species. Delicious. Humans are, unfortunately, not exempt from this list. They also resort to eating each other under certain circumstances. Although cannibalism does frequently occur in response to food scarcity, there are other conditions that promote it as well. Eating another member of the same species can also serve to reduce competition. Thus, simply decreasing danger and increasing resources can sometimes be enough to motivate the behavior. Surprisingly, cannibalism can also serve to reduce the number of parasites in a species. Although parasites can spread to the animal that ate an infected host, as more members of the species are eaten, the number of available hosts decreases. Furthermore, most parasites have not evolved to spread via cannibalism, so a cannibalistic species might actually have fewer parasites than otherwise expected. There are some specific types of cannibalism as well, which have been observed in the animal kingdom. Sexual cannibalism is common in spiders, for instance. Normally, the female will consume the male after copulation is complete. Size-structured cannibalism occurs in species where larger individuals prefer to ingest smaller individuals of the same species. Belding's ground squirrel, native to the western United States, practices this flavor of cannibalism. It is responsible for 8% of the total mortality for the entire species. Dragonfly larvae also occupy this category. In their case, it is the reason why 95% of the species dies. Filial cannibalism is a type of size-structured cannibalism. Parents of species that practice this will eat live young, as well as stillborn fetuses and still incubating eggs. Pigs are one species that consume live young. Most cat species do it as well. Intrauterine cannibalism is observed in some carnivorous species. In these species, usually multiple embryos are created, but only one or two survive. The stronger and larger embryos consume the weaker ones for food. Some fish, various species of shark, and the fire salamander practice this type of cannibalism. Human cannibalism is sometimes referred to as anthropophagy. The term cannibalism is derived from the Spanish name for a West Indies tribe called the Carib, who were described in the 17th century as frequent connoisseurs of human flesh. There is evidence of humans consuming other humans for food on most continents. The evidence also predates human civilization and appears to demonstrate that human cannibals have existed for the entire history of the species. Some cultures that ate human flesh saw it simply as food and did not think of it as being any different than the flesh of other animals. In many cases, however, warfare either caused food scarcity, which promoted cannibalism as a survival mechanism, or the act was used for punishing captured enemies. A 2003 publication in Science claimed that early humans very likely practiced cannibalism with great frequency. The evidence to support this was due to genetic analysis. It demonstrated that most humans today carry genetic markers which provide protection from types of brain diseases a person could only catch from eating another person. Evidence of bones that have been defleshed go back 600,000 years. In England, one cave contained human bones that were dated at 14,700 years. In addition to evidence of cannibalism, it also appeared that they might have used human skulls as drinking vessels. As recently as the 16th century, cannibalism was common in Europe. It was admittedly a strange type, however. For a brief time, many Europeans believed that ingesting Egyptian mummies would have curative effects. This practice ended when it was discovered that some of these so-called mummies were actually recently deceased slaves. Cannibalistic practices were also witnessed among some cultures in Africa in the 19th and early 20th century. Roger Casement was a diplomat for the British government in the early 20th century. Prior to that assignment, in 1903, he was commissioned to investigate reports of human rights issues in colonies under the rule of Leopold II of Belgium. He wrote the following to a colleague in Lisbon. concerning the state of affairs in the Congo. "The people round here are all cannibals. You never saw such a weird-looking lot in your life. There are also dwarfs called batwas in the forest who are even worse cannibals than the taller human environment. They eat man flesh raw. It's a fact." Casement then added how assailants would bring down a dwarf on the way home for the marital cooking pot. The dwarfs, as I say, dispense with cooking pots and eat and drink their human prey fresh cut on the battlefield while the blood is still warm and running. These are not fairy tales, my dear Cowper, but additional gruesome reality in the heart of this poor, benighted, savage land. It is recognized today that some accusations of cannibalism in the past have been fabricated or exaggerated. But Casement may have been accurate in his accounts where Africa in the 19th century was concerned. From 1892 to 1894, a war was fought between the city-states of Nyangwe and Kasango in the eastern Congo. There were numerous reports claiming widespread cannibalization, which was mostly focused on the Arabs who were killed during the conflict. There was even a secret society dedicated to the practice of cannibalism. The Leopard Society existed until the mid-1900s and was found in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and the Ivory Coast. Men who were part of this group would dress in leopard skins and await vulnerable travelers. They would attack the victims with weapons that resembled either leopard claws or teeth. Flesh from the victims was then distributed among the members of this group. And you thought your local Boy Scout troop was rowdy. The most recent documented instances of widespread cannibalism are from World War II. The Australian War Crimes section of the Tokyo Tribunal provided numerous reports that documented cannibalism by Japanese soldiers. They consumed the flesh of their fellow soldiers, enemy dead, and prisoners of war. For instance, in September 1942, the Japanese daily rations in New Guinea contained 800 grams of rice and canned meat. By December, this ration had decreased to 50 grams. Historian Yuki Tanaka, when describing how widespread the practice of eating human flesh during this time, stated that cannibalism was often a systematic activity conducted by whole squads and under the command of officers. Although most people find the idea of humans eating other humans to be revolting, there is usually an assumption that the people being eaten were at least dead. The victims of cannibalism typically do not experience physical or emotional discomfort over their fate. Some Japanese during World War II apparently did not share modern sentiments on this. A prisoner of war from the British Indian Army, Lance Naik Hatem Ali, testified that in New Guinea, the Japanese started selecting prisoners, and every day one prisoner was taken out and killed and eaten by the soldiers. I personally saw this happen, and about 100 prisoners were eaten at this place by the Japanese. The remainder of us were taken to another spot 50 miles, or 80 kilometers, away, where 10 prisoners died of sickness. At this place, the Japanese again started selecting prisoners to eat. Those selected were taken to a hut, where their flesh was cut from their bodies while they were still alive, and they were thrown into a ditch, where they later died. This was not a single isolated incident either. In Chichijima, in February 1945, Japanese soldiers killed and ate 5 American airmen. A 1947 war crimes trial prosecuted 30 Japanese soldiers and executed 5 for this offense. James Bradley, in his book Flyboys, A True Story of Courage, detailed several instances of Japanese soldiers eating Allied prisoners. He claimed that some prisoners were kept alive and consumed over several days. Their limbs would be amputated and consumed, as keeping the prisoner alive as long as possible kept the meat fresh. Australia has more than 100 instances of cannibalism perpetrated by the Japanese in their archives. In one notable case, an Australian lieutenant discovered several cannibalized corpses, including one consisting only of a head, which had been scalped, and a spinal column. And that, in all cases, the condition of the remains were such that there can be no doubt that the bodies had been dismembered and portions of the flesh cooked. In another documented case, a Pakistani corporal testified that Japanese soldiers cannibalized a prisoner per day for 100 days. Although the methods were brutal, the tendency of Japanese soldiers to eat their captives would at least be understandable if hunger was the main motivation. But according to Japanese scholar Toshiyuki Tanaka, it was often done to consolidate the group feeling of the troops, rather than because of food scarcity. Instances of cannibalism during the 20th century were also documented in the Soviet Union. Many of these occurred during the siege of Leningrad, which continued for nearly 3 years. Several individuals sentenced to Soviet prisons also consumed other prisoners or were themselves consumed. The Soviet journalist Yevgenia Ginsburg was a political prisoner who spent time in Gulag camps from 1938 to 1955. In her memoir Harsh Route, she describes one instance she encountered in the late 1940s. The chief warder shows me the black smoked pot filled with some food. I need your medical expertise regarding this meat. I looked into the pot and hardly hold vomiting. The fibers of that meat are very small and don't resemble anything I have seen before. The skin on some pieces bristles with black hair. A former smith from Poltava Kulesh worked together with Centurishvili. At this time, Centurishvili was only 1 month away from being discharged from the camp, and suddenly he surprisingly disappeared. Given the depravity we have examined, it may not be surprising to find that some people have consumed human flesh for no reason other than curiosity. Sometime around 1931, a New York Times reporter named William Bueller Seabrook decided to research cannibalism. In the pursuit of this task, he was able to convince a hospital intern to give him fresh meat from the body of an otherwise healthy person killed in an accident. Seabrook cooked and ate the meat and gave the following account. It was like good, fully developed veal, not young, but not yet beef. It was very definitely like that, and it was not like any other meat I have ever tasted. It was so nearly like good, fully developed veal that I think no person with a palate of ordinary, normal sensitiveness could distinguish it from veal. It was mild, good meat, with no other sharply defined or highly characteristic taste, such as, for instance, goat, high game, and pork hap. The steak was slightly tougher than prime veal, a little stringy, but not too tough or stringy to be agreeably edible. The roast from which I cut and ate a central slice was tender, and in color, texture, smell, as well as taste, strengthened my certainty that of all the meats we habitually know, veal is the one meat to which this meat is accurately comparable. There are numerous other instances of people in modern societies eating human flesh. Some, like Jeffrey Dahmer, were serial killers who also ate their victims. Others did it in public, almost as a type of performance art. And some individuals have even volunteered to be killed and eaten by others. Giving new meaning to the phrase, modern solutions require modern problems, Stockholm economics researcher Magnus Soderlund has actually suggested that cannibalism should be more widespread. He has stated that if climate change does cause food shortages, then distributing the meat of dead humans would be a way to save humanity from starvation. When asked if he would be willing to eat his fellow humans, Soderlund stated, I feel somewhat hesitant, but to not appear overly conservative, I'd have to say I'd be open to at least tasting it. As genetic evidence demonstrates, humans have been more than willing to eat their fellow humans if the alternative is death by starvation. But, given the complex nature of human behavior, there are many other reasons why cannibalism might be practiced. Sometimes these might be religious rituals, although in many cases it may simply be a tool for creating group cohesion. Since cannibalism has been widespread as recently as the 20th century, it is fair to question whether it is a basic fact of human existence. As technology progresses, and if society becomes progressively less violent, will the consumption of human meat become a relic of the past? Or, as Soderlund suggested, will we actually need to expand the practice to save the human race from climate disasters in the future? Please let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching Bad Things in History.